What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network for the top 10 decks for early June 2022. This will be our first top 10 decks installment with Astral Radiance cards in the mix. And these top 10 decks are going to be a mixture of my own opinion, community opinion, and some early tournament results, both online and the Full Grip Games had their IRL event with Astral Radiance legal, so some of those results will also be taken into account as we lead up to the next official real life events with Astral Radiance being legal, which will be the first ones, I believe, a Melbourne regionals and then Milwaukee, Wisconsin regionals. So this top 10 list will likely be changing as we go week to week, and I'd also love to hear everybody's feedback in the comments on how accurate you think the top 10 list is, how you would change it yourself, and also stick around for the following day where we'll be looking at my top 11 through 20 decks, which are kind of the decks on the bench, kind of waiting to prove themselves to become a top 10 deck. Before we get into this video today, though, shout out to my sponsors, PotownStore.com and CardTrooperGames.com. Be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off at both of those websites. Dragon Shield sleeves, my favorite brand of sleeves. Very happy to be working with them, and you can support me by using the affiliate link in the description down below when you're purchasing Dragon Shield sleeves. Beast Coast Pokemon, a collaborative Pokemon YouTube channel that I'm a part of, which you can subscribe to, link in the description. And PokemonCard.io, a site I love using to share my own deck lists and viewing the community's deck lists as well. All the links you'll need for those are in the description down below, and be sure to subscribe to this channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. Deck number 1, probably to not many people's surprise, is Mew VMAX still. Mew VMAX gains a couple of potential cards to add into it from the newest set, like the supporter Silene and trekking shoes, but Mew VMAX is just so inherently powerful, which is why it has stayed on top for so long and why so many decks tried to counter it. And with more decks coming into the mix, players may have to choose to counter either Mew VMAX or another really good deck. And I think that could potentially help Mew VMAX. And also, the decks that are just strong and consistent tend to be very, very good at the early states of the metagame when people are trying out new ideas and unrefined lists. So I'm pretty comfortable saying that Mew VMAX is the #1 deck right now. And we'll look here at a list from a recent online event piloted by wadedaze, with the only new card going to be that Silene supporter. Flip 2 coins, and then you put a number of cards up to the number of heads you flipped from your discard pile onto the top of your deck. And those are going to be, you have some really powerful options to recycle onto the top of your deck, like Power Tablet and Fusion Strike Energy, which both of those cards we previously were not getting back with anything with anything in this deck. And we could have been using Roseanne's backup previous to Silene, but Roseanne's backup is just a lot weaker because it shuffles them into your deck, and it also can't get an item card like Power Tablet. And whereas Silene can get 0, 1, or 2 cards and put them directly to the top of your deck, and then you can go ahead and draw them with Rose Tower or Fusion Strike system, which is why I think people are much more likely to play Silene than they were to have tried Roseanne's backup in the previous set. And sorry, we're just going backwards here because of my little mix-up. And now we're on to deck number 2, which is going to be Palkia V-Star with the Inteleon engine. And this is a brand new deck, so why don't we just start looking at the deck list now. Palkia V-Star, it has 280 HP. It can do 260 if both players have a full bench, and that's before things like Choice Belt and Leon and Quick Shooting. And it also has an ability that attaches up to 3 water energy from your discard pile to your water Pokemon, however you like, and that's its once a game V-Star power. The deck also has other attackers at its disposal, such as Radiant Greninja, which can do 90 and 90, and also Starmie V, which for 2 water does 50 damage for each energy on your opponent's board. This here is kind of a teched out list. It has things like the Canceling Cologne that turns off your opponent's active Pokemon's ability until the end of this turn, so you can gust up something like a Manaphy turn it off with Canceling Cologne and then use Radiant Greninja even though Manaphy's in play. It also has the Irida supporter that searches for a water Pokemon plus an item, and that item could be Battle VIP Pass, which is super strong on turn 1. Palkia V-Star, though, can just dish out a lot of damage for just 2 energy, and that damage can come out of nowhere thanks to Melanie and Palkia V-Star's V-Star Power ability that accelerates energy. So I think this deck will be no lower than top 5 for the remainder of the Astral Radiance format, but right now we're premiering it at number 2 on my top 10 list. Next is going to be Arceus Inteleon, and I do think these top 3 decks are all very close to each other, but Arceus Inteleon probably has the least inherent power to it. Mew VMAX can start taking knockouts as early as turn 1. Palkia Inteleon, like I said, can recur energy and build attackers out of nowhere. Arceus Inteleon is a little less aggressive. It's a mid-range kind of deck with some passive tools like Big Charm, Charon's Care, Path to the Peak. It's trying to slow down the pace of game just a little bit and do efficient damage while it's, healing or shutting off a power, things like that. So Arceus Inteleon, I think, will remain a top 5 deck as well. Like I mentioned, I don't think any of these top 3 decks will really be falling too far down. I think they are just that good. But of course, it is early days of the format. We haven't had official events yet for this format, so this is all speculation. So I'd love to hear your feedback if you think anything different than what I'm saying, or if you just want to echo my thoughts. Next is going to be Arceus with Jolteon Vivid Voltage variants. Now, there are many ways to build this. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So here's one piloted by Drew Kennett at the recent Vancouver Regionals with Gyarados VMAX. The Jolteon has the ability Thunderous Awakening if this Pokemon has a memory capsule tool attached to it. All water Pokemon in play have no abilities. So it shuts off Drizzle, Inteleon, Manaphy, Palkia V-Star, Radiant Greninja. It shuts off a bunch of very popular and very strong abilities. It is a little awkward to play though, because that memory capsule typically is not helping any of your other Pokemon. It goes well with Gyarados VMAX though, because Gyarados VMAX wants to copy the Gyarados V's Get Angry attack. A memory capsule allows you to use that. But other than that, memory capsule is going to be included in these variants just to activate the Jolteon's Thunderous Awakening. And it's really good if you think you're just going to play against a lot of Inteleon variants of decks and Palkia V-Star. It could even be good if you have a Pokemon that wants to deal bench damage and you want to turn off Manaphy. Another way to play this Jolteon Vivid Voltage in Arceus decks is with Malamar VMAX. Now, this and the previous Gyarados list are both pre-Astral Radiance lists from official events, so of course they might need some tinkering to update them with the new set. I think Roxanne, the new supporter card that can only be played if your opponent has 3 or less prize cards, but then it shuffles your hand to draw 6 and your opponent's hand to draw 2. That can be paired really well with Malamar VMAX's Max Jammer. So you could probably find a cut or two for a Roxanne or 2 in this deck. But just another example of how to build an Arceus Jolteon variant. And I think these are so good because I think Arceus Inteleon's very good, and I think Palkia V-Star is very good, and Jolteon shuts those down. Next is going to be Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. Now, again, remember, this is early days, and I think the more consistent raw power decks are just naturally going to be better at the beginning of a format, which allows Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX to really shine, because all it is just raw power and just needing 2 energies to attack with its strongest attack. And it got some buffs in this set from Palkia V-Star, being able to accelerate energy in just 1 turn, and then also the Radiant Hawlucha with Big Match. As long as this Pokemon's on your bench, your Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon VMAX, so that's going to help against other Ice Rider decks, against Mew VMAX, against Malamar VMAX, Gyarados VMAX, a couple of those that we just looked at. So I think this deck is super solid. It doesn't have any fancy tricks up its sleeves, but it does a lot of damage, and it does it pretty quick. Next is going to be Rapid Strike Urshifu Inteleon. Now, this remains a pretty convoluted deck if you build it like you see on the screen. It is very, very difficult to play this deck perfectly because there's always so many options available to you. But this has become the kind of the only way to build Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX because it was too weak if you just played, a 4-3 line of Urshifu and then your Inteleon and a couple techs like Zigzagoon and Metacham. It just wasn't ever going to take care of Mew VMAX and some other decks as well. It needed some techs for. You could play it like that and it'll function great, but then you'll come up against matchups that you just are never winning. So players came up with this toolbox variant of Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, and this is really the main way to play it, at least up until Astral Radiance. We'll see if players can combine it with Hisuian Samurott V-Star or any other new cards, but this is a recent top 8 list from Justin Bokhari at Vancouver Regionals. Again, no new Astral Radiance cards yet since Astral Radiance was not legal yet at this event, so perhaps try tinkering with this list to update it with some new cards if you'd like. Number 7 is going to be Arceus Crobat VMAX variants. Again, just like the Jolteon Vivid Voltage variants, there's multiple ways you can build these, but the one thing that will remain true is that they will have the Crobat Vs and the Crobat VMAX as an attacker, but also the Crobat V as an important part of the draw engine for the deck. You'll see here that it's not running Bibarel, but these decks can run Bibarel if they choose. The Bibarels just have not been a staying factor of these decks since they play the Crobat Vs and the Lumineon for their draw and their kind of their consistency engine. This one is the recent first place finisher from Vancouver Regionals with the 4 Crushing Hammer and 3 Fan of Waves, but you'll see that you can also build it like this with a secondary or even a third attacker, like the 2-1 Corviknight VMAX line, and then you've got some Metal Energy in there as well to pair with whatever attacker you choose to play. Next is Inteleon Toolbox at number 8. Now, this has really moved away from just being called Hoopa Moltres because there's much more going on than Hoopa and a Moltres. This deck actually gets help from the Hisuian Heavy Ball that just came out because you can fetch out your single copy of a card or of a basic Pokemon that got prized, like your Rowlet or your Hoopa, or if you're only playing one of this Zeraora. But the Zeraora is a card from Vivid Voltage, actually, with free retreat, and it's lightning type. Its fighting lightning does 30 plus 80 more if the defending is a V, so it does 110, and then with a belt, that's 140, and that's going to one-shot Palkia V-Star since it is weak to lightning. The new Hisuian Decidueye is quite cool. The first attack for free does 30 times the amount of damage counters already on the defending Pokemon. So if you hit it with something like Hoopa for 90 last turn, then you can attack with this for free to do 270 this turn. And since the Rowlet Birdkeeper combo is already great for sniping off Sobbles and stuff, this player decided to just throw in a Rare Candy plus a Hisuian Decidueye since you already have the Rowlet in there, and it can be a really cool attacker. So Inteleon Toolbox, I think, has a lot of potential. I have it a little bit lower on the list, but definitely has room to move up. Number 9 is going to be Blissey v Miltank. I think this is a pretty simple deck to play, but can also be built a lot of different ways. I think it's a harder deck to build than it is to play, but there's so many options. You can play the Crushing Hammers, you can play Pokegears, you can play a different stadium if you don't want to play Path. You could play a heavier Charon count. You could play Hisuian Heavy Ball in here to grab out your one-off Pokemons. I think that's really good to play in this deck. You can play heavier Miltank if you want different energies. But the base of the deck is that Miracle Body says Miltank can't be hit by Pokemon V. And some popular ways around that's going to be Max Miracle that does 130. Shady Dealings and Teleon's Aqua Bullet that does 120. And if you have a Cape of Toughness on your Miltank, neither of those one-shot it without other damage modifiers or other sources of damage counters being placed onto the Miltank. So you can make Miltank a bit tanky with that, and then Route does 10 plus 20 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. But as long as you're doing some damage, that's what really matters, while the Miltank sits out there and can't be hit by V Pokemon. And then Blissey V with Blissful Blast does 10 damage, Plus, you get to accelerate 3 energies from the discard to it, which special energies are fine, which is why this deck is all special energy. And then you can just load up a Blissey V with a lot of damage, and it does 30 more damage for each energy on the Pokemon. So you can get a whole bunch of energy on there and be doing some really high numbers of damage with that. While you're using Hyper Potion and Charon to heal, and Crushing Hammer and Path to the Peak to disrupt the opponent. And last is going to be Regigigas. Now, I did not put this deck on my tier list because I thought this deck was just a meme. I'm not 100% convinced that it will be a staying factor of this metagame because I think it is pretty easy to counter and play around once it is a known quantity. But it came out at 4th place at the Full Grip Games event this past weekend, and I've been seeing a lot of chatter about it. I've played it myself before making this top 10 list, and it is actually a functioning deck that can beat some of the top decks, but I do think it's going to be pretty easy to counter if you want to, and it can also be countered with some other collateral techs like, you know, Avery, Collapse Stadium. It's not going to like those cards. Temple of Sinnoh to make the special energies not work. So it might not stay on the top 10 list for very long, but it seems like a great early deck for this metagame. And here is the list that Nolan Freda got top 4 at the Full Grip Games event with. So this is my top 10 list for the first week of the Astral Radiance metagame. Like I said earlier, let me know your thoughts, comments, concerns down below. And also look forward to the top 11 through 20 decks video, which will kind of be the decks on the bench waiting to see if they can prove themselves and get up into the top 10. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.